Can you say exactly what the Bloomsbury Group was?
Well, it really consisted originally of 13 people, 3 women and 10 men. 9 out of 10 men had been at Cambridge, at Trinity or King's. And it so happened that after I came back from Ceylon in 1911, we all went to live in Bloomsbury. 13 people were the 3 Stephens, Vanessa Stephen, Virginia Stephen, and Adrian Stephen. Vanessa Stephen married Clive Bell, who was a member of the original group, and I married Virginia. Then there was Lytton Strachey, Maynard Keynes, Roger Fry, Duncan Grant, the painter, E.M. Forster, and Saxon Sidney Turner, who was in the Treasury, and Desmond McCarthy and his wife Molly, who lived in Chelsea.
So they were all people of very widely differing talents.
We were simply a fortuitous aggregation of friends who happened to live together. And I mean, some of us were politicians, and some of us were artists, and some of us were writers.
And you were all more or less in revolt against Victorian standards, I suppose, in effect. That
Yes, because all intelligent people at that time were in revolt against their ancestors.
When you were up at Cambridge, I suppose you met Rupert Brooke.
Well, he was younger. I met him when I came back from Ceylon in 1911. He was then up at Cambridge.
He was more of a friend of your wife's than of yours, wasn't he? On the whole?
Yes, he became quite a friend of me up to a point, and of her, but he was rather a dangerous friend. He took very much against all of us in Bloomsbury towards the end of his life.
To return to your wife, I think you wouldn't hesitate to call her a person of genius. Apart from the evidence of her writings, can you describe any special attributes that marked her out from ordinary people?
She had what I call genius of a combination of imagination and intelligence, which is extremely rare, I think. Normally, she was extremely happy and enjoyed all the usual things of life, but every now and then in conversation, for instance, she would do what I call leave the ground and give a most fantastic account, say, of a perfectly ordinary thing which had happened or which she'd seen, which was like what she does, I think, when she's at her best in her novels.
One can see from her photographs she's also a very beautiful person, like her sister Vanessa Bell. And yet there's a very moving section in your book, a rather disturbing section. You talk about how people in the street used to laugh at her and how distressed she was. Can you give any reasons about why she should have been thought so strange?
I think really it was because she used to be thinking about other things and walking about rather as if she was in a dream. She dressed, I think, very beautifully, but rather unlike most people, and walked about in this curious way. It was, I think, also connected with the fact that she had mental breakdowns all her life, and it showed to a certain extent to ordinary people, and then, of course, they always laugh at them.
One reviewer remarked on the fact that although you eventually became Freud's publisher, it was strange that there's no mention in your book of either you or your wife deciding to consult a Freudian analyst.
A very simple answer to that was that she'd had a mental breakdown before 1900, and then she had one in 1912. And in 1912, nobody really knew anything about psychoanalysis. I didn't know any. I doubt whether there was then 10 people in London who would have known that there was a psychoanalyst. Of course, afterwards, we published all Freud's works, and we once went and saw Freud when he came here.
You both had first novels published during the early years of your marriage, The Voyage Out and Village in the Jungle. First novels very seldom make a fortune for writers. Both the books are still in print, I believe. It'd be interesting to know if you fared any differently or whether you made much money out of them.
No, we paid practically nothing. I think in the first 10 years of writing, I made £6 a year by book, and she made about 15.
How did you come to start the Hogarth Press, and what was your reason for becoming a publisher?
We wanted to print, and we went to a school of printing who couldn't teach us because you could only be taught printing if you undertook to be an apprentice. And we happened to see some printing machines in Farringdon Road and went in and bought one and started printing ourselves, and that started the Hogarth Press.
You had an extraordinary list of authors in your first years. I think many publishers would be very envious of all these people, and you published T.S. Eliot and Catherine Mansfield, I think, and The Wasteland, didn't you?
We printed The Wasteland with our own hands and published in an edition of 300
copies.
And made about 15 or 20 pounds.
Yes. When did you become an ordinary commercial publishing house?
We started in 1919, really, in a vague sort of way, 1917, and we turned into a regular publisher about 1923 or 24.
What was your first success?
Kew Gardens by my wife, which we printed with our own hands, and was reviewed very favourably in the Times Literary Supplement, and that really turned us into a publisher.
Why do you think the Hogarth Press has survived?
Our authors are so good and the publishers are so efficient, I think.
Did your wife work full-time sometimes in the publishing firm? Did it interfere with her writing in any sort of way? Or?
No, not really. She used to go down into the basement in Tavistock Square when we lived there and set up the type, or even she quite often used to pack up the books, but only in the afternoons, and she only wrote in the mornings. The reading of manuscripts was rather a trial, because so many manuscripts came, and she used to rather deplore the amount of time which she had to spend.
Would you advise any young man or woman who wanted to write to go into publishing or into journalism?
No, I personally wouldn't, but I'm told that I'm quite wrong about this. I think it gets one into the habit of regarding writing, quite rightly for the purpose of journalism, as a ephemeral thing.
Your fiction is, I think, almost totally confined to your earliest writing days, isn't it?
Yes, I gave it up, really.
Was that anything to do with publishing or journalism?
It was simply that we had to earn our living, and if we'd both written fiction for the first 15 years, we should have been completely bankrupt and unable to feed ourselves. One of them had to give it up.
One reviewer, Angus Wilson, I think it was, commented on the fact that you don't tell us what your wife thought of the practical politics in your life. Was she involved in your political life in any way?
She was very interested in it. I mean, for instance, she ran a women's cooperative guild branch in Richmond. But her business was to write novels, and therefore it was a full-time thing. But she was very interested in politics, in fact, in everything.